"You're not welcome here," Richard snarled, then slammed the doors in my face. Behind him, guests were arriving for a wedding I planned, in a hall I built, at a venue I owned. My wife, Linda, stood beside him, silent, until she whispered, "Just leave, Daniel." But it got worse. Hours later, I watched them toast beneath beams my father and I had raised, while I sat alone in my truck, overdrafted, ignored, erased. I thought it was over. Then, as a tray passed by, the caterer leaned in and murmured, "Welcome back, owner." He knew something they didn't. And that's when I stopped begging and started counting. Key by key, I was going to take it all back. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm 45 years old. I run the estate, a wedding venue my late father Tom and I built from weathered beams and stubborn dreams. Every morning, I walk the grand hall, breathing in the citrus polish on oak rails while sunlight warms the ancient dust. My wife Linda handles the bookings, her genuine smile warming each tour, while her parents, Richard and Margaret Walsh, hover at the edges with their tight-lipped assessments and endless talk of margins. What started as family dinners turned into impromptu audits, with Richard sliding insurance forms across dessert plates. What they don't know is that father taught me well. Every permit, contract, and rider sits duplicated in my locked storage unit across town. Linda means well, but her parents track revenue more closely than birthdays. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled up to the estate that Saturday morning in my best navy suit, the one I'd bought special for hosting duties. The late September air had that crisp feel that makes brides beam during outdoor photos. You know the kind, where the light hits just right and everything looks like a magazine shoot. "Morning, Charlie," I called to our regular valet, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Weird. My shoes crunched on the gravel as I headed for the main entrance, adjusting my cuffs like I'd done 1,000 times before. Linda's cousin Jessica was getting married today. Another family celebration at our venue. Should have been routine. Then I saw them. Richard and Margaret, Linda's parents, standing like sentries at the carved double doors my father and I had restored ourselves. Remember those doors? Took us 3 weeks just to strip the old varnish, but the mahogany underneath was worth every blister. "That's far enough, Daniel." Richard's voice had all the warmth of a tax audit. Margaret clutched her designer purse like it might shield her from something contagious. "What's going on?" I asked, though my gut was already clenching. "You ever have that moment where you know your whole world's about to shift?" That's what it felt like. Richard raised a stapled packet of papers, waving them like a victory flag. "The estate belongs to us now. Legal transfer of ownership. Your signature's right here." He tapped a page with his manicured finger. "The one Linda had you sign, for insurance purposes. Remember?" The memory hit like a sucker punch. Linda, sliding papers across our kitchen table, months ago, her voice casual. "Just some coverage updates, honey. You know how Dad worries about liability." A black SUV pulled up behind me, and I heard car doors slam. "Mr. Mercer," called one of the groomsmen, waving as he helped his date in her flowing dress across the gravel. They thought I was still their host, still the owner. "You need to leave," Margaret said, her voice dropping as guests passed. Now, I could taste metal in my mouth, like I'd bitten my tongue in my sleep. My hands started shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper. Rage, shame. The grand hall behind them was my life's work. Every oak beam, every polished rail, every weekend penciled into that clipboard Margaret was now holding. They were proof I'd made something of myself, of my father's legacy. "You can't just," I started. "We can, and we have." Richard stepped closer, his cologne too strong, his voice low. "Unless you'd like me to call the police about a trespasser harassing wedding guests?" My legs went wooden. More cars were pulling up. More guests smiling and waving at the man they thought owned this place. The man I used to be, 10 minutes ago? That's when I heard it. Just a whisper, right by my ear as someone brushed past me. "Welcome back, owner." I spun around. It was Carl, our regular caterer, disappearing through the side door toward the kitchens. Steam from the warming ovens followed him out, along with the smell of garlic and herbs. But it was his words that hit hardest. "Welcome back, owner." What did he mean by that? The way he'd said it. Like he knew something. Like owner wasn't just a courtesy title, but a fact he was certain about. My heart started hammering against my ribs. "I mean it, Daniel." Richard's voice cut through my thoughts. "Leave now, or I'm making that call." I backed away, watching my in-laws sweep into my grand hall like they'd built it themselves. The doors closed with a solid thud that seemed to echo in my chest. But Carl's words kept ringing in my ears, louder than any door could slam. "Welcome back, owner." What did the caterer know that I didn't? I waited by the porte cochere as the sun sank, and the fairy lights started twinkling on like fireflies. Linda would have to come outside eventually, had to face me, had to explain what the hell was happening to our life. When she finally emerged, she was fussing with Jessica's train. All business mode like this was just another event day. My throat went tight seeing her there, beautiful in her navy dress, coordinator's clipboard tucked under her arm like always. "Linda," I called softly. She froze, then turned slowly. The string lights cast strange shadows across her face. "Linda, please. What's going on?" "Daniel." Her voice was flat, professional, like I was just another vendor causing problems. "You shouldn't be here." "Shouldn't be here? This is our venue. Our life's work." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. The last thing I needed was to make a scene. "That paperwork your dad's waving around. You said it was for insurance." She wouldn't meet my eyes, kept staring through me like I was already gone. "It was for insurance. That's all it was supposed to be." "Supposed to be?" "Linda, they're saying they own everything now. I can't discuss this." She clutched her clipboard tighter. "You need to leave." Inside, I could hear the string quartet warming up, the same melody they always played for ceremonial entrances, floating out from the grand hall where Dad and I had spent weeks hand-sanding every inch of flooring. Now, there was some guy in a security uniform posted just inside the vestibule, watching me like I might try to storm the castle. I circled around to the service entrance, hoping to catch Carl between appetizer runs. Found him rolling out a cart of champagne flutes, but when I tried to corner him, he wouldn't slow down. "Not here," he muttered, barely moving his lips, eyes everywhere. Then he was gone. Metal door swinging shut behind him. The sun had fully set now, and guests were drifting in for the reception. A few recognized me, offered awkward smiles or confused little waves. I heard someone whisper, "family drama," and my face burned. They thought this was just some petty squabble, not theft wrapped in legal papers. The gravel crunched under my feet as I backed away from the building. Through the windows I could see Richard and Margaret holding court near the head table, all smiles and handshakes like they'd built this place themselves. The toasts would be starting soon. That carefully timed dance of speeches and serving that Linda and I had choreographed over hundreds of events. But not tonight. Tonight I was just the guy lurking in the parking lot, watching his life happen without him. I got in my truck, but couldn't bring myself to start it. Leaving felt like giving up, like abandoning everything Dad and I had poured ourselves into. Remember what he always said about the estate? "Son, every nail we drive is a promise to the future." Well, I wasn't about to break that promise. So I pulled around behind the hedgerow where the security lights didn't reach, cut the engine and settled in for the long haul. Through the open windows, I could hear muffled laughter, scattered applause, the DJ announcing the first dance. The same soundtrack that usually meant success now felt like salt in an open wound. Midnight crept closer. My back ached from the truck seat, but exhaustion was nothing new in this business. I set my phone alarm for 5 a.m. Carl always did early prep work, and tomorrow I'd make damn sure to catch him before anyone else arrived. Maybe then I'd get some actual answers. The party was winding down now. Headlights swept past as cars pulled out, carrying away guests who had no idea they'd celebrated in a stolen house. I watched the cleaning crew arrive, wondered if they'd been told to report to new bosses now. As I settled in for what remained of the night, one thought kept nagging. Would Richard and Margaret actually call the cops if they found my truck still here at sunrise? The way they'd looked at me earlier, like I was something stuck to their shoes. Yeah, they probably would. I jerked awake to water droplets sliding down the windshield, my neck stiff from another night in the truck. Dawn was just breaking, painting the estate's windows in soft orange. For a second, it felt like any other morning getting ready to open up. Then, reality hit like a fist to the gut. You ever notice how fast things can fall apart? 3 weeks ago, I was signing contracts and checking wine deliveries. Now I was living on drive-through coffee and whatever dollar menu items could stretch till tomorrow. My phone kept buzzing with overdraft notices. Turns out when you lose your business, the bills don't exactly stop coming. "Your account is overdrawn," became my morning alarm. Insurance payment bounced yesterday. Credit cards nearly maxed. And rent? Let's just say my landlord's patience was wearing thinner than my wallet. I kept the truck parked near the service entrance most nights, telling myself I was watching for Carl, but really, I guess I couldn't let go. The smell of fryer oil and garlic would drift out around dinner time, followed by music and laughter floating through the walls. All those happy strangers celebrating inside my grand hall. never knowing the real owner was sitting out in the dark like some ghost. The society pages really twisted the knife. There they were, Richard and Margaret, grinning from a full-color spread about visionary owners breathing new life into the region's premier wedding venue. They posed in front of Dad's hand-carved archway like they'd built it themselves. I couldn't stop staring at Margaret's pearl necklace, probably bought with my booking deposits. Linda's responses, when they came at all, were just one word: stop. Sometimes with a period, sometimes without. Like she couldn't even spare the punctuation anymore. The worst was when people recognized me. Yesterday, Sarah, the florist we'd worked with for years, spotted me grabbing coffee at the gas station. Her eyes went wide, then dropped to the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered, hurrying past like I had something catching. I sat there in the truck, scrolling through photos on my phone. Pictures of permits, inspection certificates, Dad's careful signature next to mine on every document. We'd done everything by the book, documented every step. The storage unit downtown was still stacked with bankers' boxes, each one labeled in Dad's precise handwriting. Electrical 2016-2018, plumbing permits, property surveys. The morning dew was burning off now, and my stomach growled. I checked my balance, $23.47. Another week till payday at the hardware store job I'd grabbed to keep the lights on. My chest got tight just doing the math. You know what's funny? It wasn't even the anger eating at me anymore. Sure, that was still there, simmering away. But mostly I just felt tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. I leaned forward until my forehead touched the steering wheel, closing my eyes against the morning glare. All those boxes of papers, every permit and contract we'd ever filed, what good were they now against whatever was in that packet Richard waved in my face? Maybe I was just fooling myself, sleeping in a truck and hanging onto scraps of the past while they lived it up in my house. I straightened up, wiping condensation from the inside of the windshield. Another wedding party was arriving early for setup. I recognized the rental company's van. Time to move the truck before someone called security. Again, my phone buzzed while I was staring at the estate's evening lights. 2 words from Carl: sit tight. 20 minutes later, I pulled into Dottie's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee's always burnt but nobody complains. Carl was already there, occupying his usual booth by the window. He'd aged since our last job together. More gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes, but those hands still looked strong enough to bend rebar. "You look like hell," he said as I slid into the booth. "Feel worse." My laugh came out hollow. The waitress appeared with a pot of coffee. Carl waited until she'd filled both cups and retreated before leaning forward. "Tell me everything. Start with the papers." I walked him through it all. The insurance documents Linda had pushed across our kitchen table. Richard waving that packet in my face, the lockout, the bouncing accounts. My voice cracked when I got to the society pages spread. Carl just listened, occasionally sipping his coffee, those contractor's eyes taking everything in. When I finished, he tapped his knuckles on the tabletop 3 times. An old habit from checking drywall. "You never sold," he said finally. "You granted temporary stewardship to calm Linda's parents. Remember?" I started to shake my head, then froze. There was something, a memory trying to surface. Carl on my back porch last spring, looking over draft contracts while we replaced rotted boards. He'd pointed to something, mentioned separating stewardship from ownership. "The early drafts," I said slowly, "before Linda's parents got involved. You looked them over during the porch rebuild." Carl nodded. "Poison pills, Danny. Good contractors bury them in permits and riders. Sometimes they save your life." He pulled out his phone, started scrolling through his calendar. "When can you get into that storage unit?" "Now, if you want. I've still got the key." The storage facility's security lights cast weird shadows as we rolled up the metal door. The smell hit me first. Old paper and cardboard, with that hint of dust that always reminded me of Dad's office. The boxes stood in neat rows, just like we'd left them. Permits, insurance, riders, invoices. Each one labeled in Dad's precise handwriting. "Start with anything from the last 2 years, Carl said, already pulling boxes forward. "I'll take permits. You handle contracts. Look for riders, amendments, anything with deadline language." We set up a folding table, spread out documents under Carl's clip-on work light. He grabbed a legal pad, started sketching out columns. We matched dates here, cross-reference riders here. Flag any deadlines in red. The familiar rhythm of working with Carl settled over me as we developed our system. Just like old times on a build, checking each other's measurements, catching the small details that could bring down a whole project. Something tightened in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or fear. What exactly had I signed when Linda pushed those papers at me? What had Dad's obsessive documentation preserved that might save me now? Danny. Carl's voice pulled me back. He was holding up his phone, showing the time. 5:47 a.m. We'd been at it all night. One more box, I said, reaching for the next in line. Carl shook his head. No, we do this right. We do it rested. Meet back here at 7 tonight? I nodded, helping him stack the examined papers into new piles. The metal door rattled down behind us as the sun started painting the eastern sky. In my truck's rearview mirror, I could see that plain storage unit door, Unit 237. Just another anonymous box in a row of identical ones. But inside those cardboard boxes, in Dad's careful files and my own compulsive record-keeping, either lay the proof that would save the estate or the final evidence of my ruin. I just didn't know which yet. Ever spend a week living in a storage unit? No? Well, let me tell you, it's not exactly a 5-star hotel, but there we were, Carl and me, night after night, perched on rickety folding chairs we'd salvaged from his garage. The only luxury was this battery-powered LED lamp that cast everything in this weird bluish glow. Nothing piles getting bigger than the maybe pile, I said, tossing another manila folder onto the growing stack of dead ends. That's how it goes. Carl didn't look up from his clipboard, where he was building this intricate timeline. Red dots for permits, blue for contract writers, all connected to when we'd expanded the Grand Hall. Your dad was thorough. I'll give him that. The mention of father made my throat tight. I could almost smell his aftershave mixing with fresh sawdust as we'd review paperwork after each day's build. Yeah, he never met a form he didn't want in triplicate. Some of the older documents were so delicate, they practically crumbled in my hands. I started photographing everything with my phone. Father's neat signature, the notary stamps, even the coffee stains on the corners. Every few minutes, certain words would jump out at me. Reversion, consideration, debt satisfied. Each one sent my heart racing, remembering how the caterer had whispered owner, like he knew something I didn't. Riders hide teeth, Carl muttered, not for the first time that night. He was hunched over a stack of correspondence from the early days, when Linda's parents first started showing interest in the estate. Look at this. They were pushing for protection during peak season even back then. I leaned over his shoulder. The letter was typed on Richard's law firm letterhead, all formal language and veiled threats. But there, in the third paragraph, something caught my eye. Wait, what's that about quarterly settlement obligations? Carl circled the phrase with his red pen. Good catch. Could be nothing. Could be everything. He made another notation on his timeline. These kinds of clauses, they're like time bombs. Set them right. They work for you. Miss one detail. Thunder rolled outside, making the metal walls vibrate. We'd been at this for hours, and my eyes were starting to blur. Box 6 lay empty beside me, its contents sorted into our growing system of piles. Boxes 7 through 10 still waited their turn, squatting in the shadows like silent judges. We should call it, Carl said, checking his watch. Storm's coming in. My back cracked as I stood, and I realized I'd been hunched over for so long I could barely straighten up. Yeah, okay, but I want to hit those last boxes before sunrise. Something about that quarterly settlement phrase. Carl nodded, already gathering up his timeline notes. Could be the thread we need to pull, but we pull it wrong. Whole thing unravels. We packed everything away with the same care we'd use on a job site. Tools in their proper places, materials protected from the elements. The nothing pile went back into their original boxes, but the maybe documents got special treatment. Each one went into Carl's waterproof job folder, protected by plastic sleeves. The first fat drops of rain hit the pavement as I locked up Unit 237. A cold wind whipped through the storage facility, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and ozone. I rolled the key between my fingers, thinking about that phrase. Quarterly settlement obligations. Was it just more legal gibberish? Or had we finally found something with teeth? 7 tonight? Carl called from his truck. Make it 6, I shouted back. I want to know what's in those last boxes. The wind picked up as I walked to my own truck, and I had to lean into it just to stay upright. Somewhere in the distance, lightning split the sky, illuminating rows and rows of identical storage units. In one of them, buried in Father's meticulous records, that single phrase waited like a loaded gun. I just had to figure out where to aim it. The storage unit's fluorescent light buzzed like an angry wasp when Carl and I started in on Box 7 at first light. My hands were still coffee warm, and the paperwork felt cold and slick, like handling fish. You ever notice how hope starts to fade around Box 3 or 4? By Box 7, You're running on pure stubbornness. Insurance renewals, I muttered, flipping through another stack. More insurance. Insurance. Addendum. The morning rain drummed steadily on the metal roof, matching my mounting headache. Keep going, Carl said, not looking up from box 8. Your dad filed everything in triplicate, remember? Even junk has a purpose. I nodded, thinking of father's watchmaker precision with paperwork. The memory of his reading glasses perched on his nose while he reviewed contracts at the kitchen table hit me hard. Yeah, he'd say, hold up. Carl's voice cut sharp through the rain noise. He was holding something from box 9, a stapled packet that had been sandwiched between 2 thick insurance policy renewals. This one's different. My throat went dry when I saw the header. Sunset clause, reversion. Carl cleared his throat and read aloud. In the event stewardship debts remain unpaid at the close of any financial quarter, full ownership rights revert automatically to the original deed holder at the opening of the subsequent quarter. The fluorescent light seemed to pulse brighter. Say that again. He did, slower this time, pointing at each key phrase. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely hear him over it. Carl, what's today's date? He pulled out his phone, opened the calendar. If this quarter ends when I think it does, his work-roughened finger traced across the screen. 58 days. That's what we've got until automatic reversion kicks in. My hands shook as I photographed every page of the writer. They wouldn't have read this carefully, I said. Not with how fast they pushed everything through. No way they spotted it, Carl agreed. These types, they see what they want to see. Skip the fine print when they think they've won. I grabbed my notebook, started a checklist. Get the writer notarized. Prepare supporting documents. Line up witnesses. We can't breathe a word of this, I said. If they get wind of it, they'll clear those debts faster than a summer storm, Carl finished. And you'll lose your shot. The reality of what lay ahead settled over me like a heavy coat. 58 more days of sleeping in the truck. 58 days of watching strangers celebrate in my grand hall. 58 days of Linda's text notifications that I'd have to ignore, no matter how much they burned. The caterer, I said suddenly. That's why he said what he did. He must have seen this writer when they took over food service contracts. Carl nodded. Smart. Keep him close. We'll need a neutral witness when the day comes. Someone who can testify the reversion was automatic, not forced. I pulled out my own phone, opened the calendar app. There it was. The end of the quarter, 58 days away. I marked it with a red dot, then wrote, Open, Owner, across the date in the notes field. The letters stared back at me, bold and permanent. We'll need affidavits ready, Carl said, already thinking ahead like a good contractor. Documentation that shows the debts were their responsibility and remained unpaid. Proof you never agreed to assume them. The rain intensified, hammering the unit's roof like it was trying to get our attention. The lamp flickered once, reminding us how fragile everything was. The light, the papers, this chance. 58 days, I repeated, my voice hardly a whisper. The number felt massive and tiny all at once. Long enough for them to discover the clause if we weren't careful. Short enough to survive if we were smart. Carl carefully returned the writer to its hiding place between the insurance forms. Not a word to anyone, he said. Not even a hint. You've got to play defeated right up until the moment you're not. I thought about the in-laws walking through my grand hall right now. Probably giving another tour. Probably bad-mouthing my work to potential clients. The old me would have charged in. Writer held high, demanding justice on the spot. But father didn't raise me to be reckless with advantages. So I just nodded, feeling the weight of 58 days pressing down on my shoulders. The calendar on my phone seemed to pulse with that red dot, like a digital countdown to everything I'd lost. Or everything I might regain. 30 days. The number hit me like a sucker punch when I checked the calendar this morning. Halfway through this twisted countdown, and my grip on sanity was starting to slip. Linda's latest text glowed on my phone. Move on. 2 words that felt like acid eating through my chest. I'd called her 3 times yesterday, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd want to hear about the estate's leaking gutter, the one above the east entrance that I'd always maintained. But no, just those 2 words that seemed to sum up everyone's opinion of me these days. You look like hell, Carl said, dropping a paper bag on my makeshift desk in the storage unit. The smell of hot breakfast sandwich cut through the musty air. When's the last time you actually slept? I couldn't remember. The truck's seat had become my bed, my office, my personal prison cell. Every night I watched the estate's lights dim, then brighten again with sunrise. The routine was wearing me down faster than I wanted to admit. Eat, Carl ordered, pushing the bag closer. Then we're reviewing the notarization schedule again. I took a half-hearted bite while he pulled out our working binder, labeled reversion packet in my careful handwriting. Inside, we'd organized everything: permit, copies, writer duplicates, time-stamped photographs. Each morning, I added another exhibit, another piece of proof that the estate was mine by right. The caterer finally texted back, I said, showing Carl my phone. Just 3 words. I'll stand there. Good. Another witness locked in. Carl made a check mark on our list. How's the perimeter watch going? Every afternoon, I walked the estate's boundaries, learning its rhythms. The service gates, distinctive creak at 2 p.m. when deliveries arrived. The way shadows fell across the hedge maze at dusk. The blind spots where I could observe without being seen. Part of me knew it was becoming an obsession, but I couldn't stop. Same schedule, I reported. They're creatures of habit. Makes it easier to... The words died in my throat as thunder rolled overhead. Rain started falling, fat drops hammering the unit's metal roof. The sound triggered a memory. Father and me rushing to cover fresh lumber during a surprise storm. Laughing as we got soaked. That's when the truck decided it had had enough. The engine wouldn't even turn over. Just clicked sadly in the growing darkness. I sat there, key in the ignition, while rain drummed against the windshield and doubt flooded in. What the hell was I doing? Normal people hired lawyers. Normal people filed lawsuits. Normal people didn't live in their trucks for months, collecting papers like some conspiracy theorist, waiting for a clause that might not even hold up. Carl must have sensed I was spiraling. He showed up with his nephew's sedan, tossed me the keys. Use it until we get the truck fixed. I sat in that borrowed car, hand hovering over the ignition, and for the first time since this started, I seriously considered running. Just driving until the estate and its memories disappeared in the rearview mirror. Father would understand, right? Some battles weren't worth the cost to fight them. My phone buzzed. Carl. Finish the job. The rain intensified, drumming against the hood in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me. Each drop was a second ticking by, another moment closer to either victory or total defeat. The estate's lights blazed through the storm, and I could picture the in-laws inside, probably congratulating themselves on another successful event. They thought they'd broken me. Maybe they had. But then I remembered something Father used to say when we hit setbacks during construction. Son, the easy path and the right path rarely point in the same direction. I opened my eyes, staring at the estate through the rain-streaked windshield. The borrowed sedan's engine stayed silent. My hand, still, hovering over the key. 30 more days stretched ahead like an endless dark tunnel. The question wasn't whether I could endure it. The question was whether I would choose to. 10 days. The number hit different when I wrote it on our planning whiteboard in the storage unit. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while Carl and I went through our morning checklist one more time. Affidavits? Carl called out, tapping his pen against the clipboard. Notarized Tuesday. Triple copies in the blue folder. I pulled them out, showing the raised seals catching the light. We'd spent a small fortune on rush notary services, but every signature had to be perfect. Exhibits? Indexed and time-stamped. I patted the thick binder. Every permit, every writer, every photo labeled and dated. All pointing to quarter open like arrows on a map. Carl nodded, marking items off. And the caterer? I pulled out my phone, hitting speaker as it rang. The familiar voice answered on the second ring. Loading dock entrance 5:45 a.m. sharp, the caterer said before I could ask. I'll be there. You remember the key points to watch for? I needed to hear it again. Document presentation, verbal notice, timestamp confirmation. Don't worry, I've been keeping notes since that first morning. There was a pause. They deserve what's coming. After hanging up, I practiced the speech I'd deliver in the foyer. The words had to be exact. No emotion, no accusations, just cold, legal fact. As of 6 a.m. on the first day of this quarter, pursuant to the sunset clause in Rider 23B, all stewardship rights revert to the original owner due to failure to satisfy quarterly obligations. Again, Carl said. Slower this time. I repeated it until the phrases felt carved into my tongue. Meanwhile, Carl sorted through our role assignments one final time. He would handle document distribution, making sure every relevant party got copies. The caterer would verify chain of custody and timing. And I would deliver the news, the moment I'd been waiting for through all those nights in the truck. Look at this garbage, I muttered, pulling up the latest society pages on my phone. There they were again, the in-laws beaming at some charity gala dubbed Pillars of the Community. In the caption, my stomach churned. You think they might suspect something? Try to clear the debts last minute? After 3 months of radio silence? Not likely. Carl scratched his beard. Pride makes people sloppy. They probably think you gave up weeks ago. I found myself tracing Father's signature on one of the original building permits. The ink had faded slightly, but his confident strokes remained clear. What, if there are cameras? Press? Then you stand tall and let the truth do the talking. Carl's voice softened. Your father would be proud of how you've handled this. The reminder steadied me. I set 2 alarms on my phone for 4:30 a.m., then added a third just to be safe. No way I was sleeping through this. One more thing, Carl said, pulling out a garment bag. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Inside was a crisp, dark suit. Not the one I'd worn that first morning, but similar. You're the owner. Look the part. My throat tightened as I took the bag. Thanks, Carl. For everything. Save it for tomorrow. Get some rest. He headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Daniel? Try to actually sleep this time. I sent him a quick text after he left. We move at 6. Then I sat in the borrowed sedan, staring at the calendar glowing on my dashboard in the growing darkness. The date I'd circled months ago was almost here. 10 days left of waiting, of watching, of wondering if every detail was perfect enough to spring the trap. The estate's windows blazed with another evening event, music floating across the grounds. I touched the suit bag beside me, imagining the moment I'd walk through those doors again. Not as an outsider, but as the rightful owner returning home. The quarter would open before sunrise. By the time the in-laws realized what was happening, it would already be done. All those nights of preparation, of endurance, of holding my tongue while they played Lord and Lady of the Manor. It came down to these final days. I started the car, calendar still glowing beside me. Time to get what sleep I could before the countdown hit 0. I pulled up to the estate's service entrance at 5:45 a.m. sharp, the borrowed sedan's headlights cutting through pre-dawn mist. Carl's truck was already there, and the caterer's van idled nearby, steam rising from the exhaust in the cool morning air. Right on time, Carl said, hefting the document binder as I approached. He'd worn a suit too, not his usual contractor gear. The caterer nodded silently, checking his watch. My hands should have been shaking, but instead I felt oddly calm. Amazing what 58 days of waiting can do to your nerves. I adjusted my tie, smoothed down the jacket Carl had given me, and took a deep breath of morning air that smelled like wet grass and possibility. Everything's ready? I asked, though I knew the answer. We'd triple-checked every detail. Exhibits organized, copies prepared, timestamps verified. Carl patted the binder. The caterer here has his written statement about the original lockout morning. We're set. Remember those moments when time seems to slow down, when you can feel the weight of what's coming. That's what it felt like walking through the loading dock, past prep stations where kitchen staff paused their morning routines to stare. My footsteps echoed on the polished floors Father and I had laid years ago. We emerged into the vestibule just as the first rays of sunlight started filtering through the high windows. 2 servers were setting up a coffee station, carefully arranging crystal stemware that I'd purchased last spring. They froze when they saw me, recognition flickering across their faces. I heard the in-laws before I saw them, their voices carrying from the grand hall where they were apparently reviewing setup for a morning wedding venue tour. Perfect timing. Excuse me, I called out, my voice steady and clear. I need everyone's attention for a formal notice. The in-law father emerged first, his face darkening when he saw me. You're not allowed, pursuant to Rider 23B known as the Sunset Clause, I continued, moving to the antique table in the foyer. All stewardship rights revert to the original owner due to failure to satisfy quarterly obligations. I began laying out the notarized exhibits in precise order, as Carl had practiced with me. This is nonsense, the in-law father sputtered, but his eyes locked onto the documents Carl was now distributing. You can't just walk in here and... The reversion triggered automatically at 12:01 a.m. today, I said, pointing to the time-stamped bank statements showing 3 months of unpaid vendor accounts. The clause language is quite clear. The in-law mother appeared at the top of the grand staircase, Linda pale beside her. Staff members had stopped all activity, forming a loose circle around the foyer. The only sound was papers rustling as Carl continued, passing out copies. I can confirm the chain of custody for all documentation, the caterer spoke up, his voice carrying in the silence, as well as my direct knowledge of the original lockout incident. Through the front windows, I could see cars starting to arrive, guests for the morning walk-through. Perfect timing indeed. The first couple stepped into the foyer, phones already raised as they sensed the tension. The in-law father grabbed one of the packets, flipping pages with trembling hands until he found the clause. I watched his face change as he read. color draining away as the legal language sank in. His wife hurried down the stairs to read over his shoulder. This is, he stammered. Binding, I finished for him. As your lawyers will confirm when they review it. The estate's ownership reverted to me at quarter open this morning. More guests filtered in, phones, recording. The in-law mother whispered urgently to Linda, who hadn't moved from the stairs. She looked like she might be sick. I picked up my copy of the binder and stood quietly, letting the moment settle. Let them make the next move. Through the windows, I could see more cars pulling up. The audience was growing. The in-law father's hands were shaking now as he read through the packet again. His wife clutched his arm, eyes darting between the gathering crowd and the damning documents. Linda pressed herself against the railing like she wanted to disappear. I waited, my heart steady, as cameras clicked and whispers spread. The choice was theirs now. Fight this and risk public humiliation. Flee and admit defeat, or beg for mercy in front of all these witnesses. You know that moment when a carefully stacked house of cards starts to collapse? How the first card barely trembles before the whole thing comes crashing down? That's exactly what happened next. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from our regular florist. 3 months of unpaid orders, taking this to collections. Before I could even respond, another notification pinged from the linen service, then the rental company, then the sound team. Each one forwarding proof of bounced checks and ignored invoices straight to the bank. Carl stepped forward. All business. Attention staff, he announced, pulling out fresh work orders. Per the reversion clause, all operations now fall under Daniel Mercer's authority. Please sign these to confirm the transition. The in-law father's phone started ringing. He fumbled it out of his pocket, face reddening as he saw the caller ID. When he hit speaker by mistake, a banker's clipped voice filled the foyer. Sir, we're placing a hold on all business accounts pending. Investigation of... He jabbed the button to silence it, but the damage was done. I've documented the ownership continuity, the caterer said quietly to a cluster of nervous vendors who'd gathered near the kitchen door. Your contracts remain valid under Mr. Mercer's management. My own phone lit up with a message from the Society Page's editor, requesting comment on allegations of family fraud at the estate. Deadline noon. The same publication that had praised the in-laws as visionary owners just weeks ago was now chasing the scandal angle. Funny how fast those tides turn. The in-law father spun toward Linda, who still hadn't moved from her spot on the stairs. Did you know about this? He snarled, waving the claws. Did you help him hide this? Linda just stared at the paper, her fingers white on the railing. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The in-law mother tried to salvage what dignity she could, gathering her designer bag and attempting a graceful descent of the grand staircase. But halfway down, a dozen phones raised to record her exit. Camera flashes exploded like lightning, and she stumbled, catching herself on the banister as her heels slipped. The reversion clause is quite clear, I said, keeping my voice calm and professional despite the chaos unfolding. I've prepared a new ledger showing all outstanding debts and current vendor relationships. Everything's documented and notarized. A few staff members started clapping softly, the same ones who'd watched me build this place with father, who knew the truth. I held up my hand to stop them. This wasn't about celebration or revenge. It was about setting things right. More phones were ringing now. The in-laws' phones, the estate office line, my cell. Each call seemed to bring another financial domino down. I could see it in their faces as they realized just how complete the collapse would be. Not just the estate, but their entire house of cards, built on stolen trust and unpaid debts. The gathered crowd of morning tour guests had grown, their phones recording every moment of the in-laws' fall from grace. Someone near the back was already typing furiously on their phone, probably live posting the whole scene. By noon, there wouldn't be a society column in town that wasn't running this story. The in-law mother finally reached the bottom of the stairs, mascara smeared where she'd wiped away tears of humiliation. Her husband stood frozen, still clutching the clause papers, as his phone buzzed again and again with calls from creditors and bankers and who knows who else. Linda hadn't moved or spoken. She just watched it all crumble, as silent now as she'd been when she'd slid those insurance papers across our kitchen table months ago. I had tours to lead. Life doesn't pause for karma, and we had 6 couples booked to preview the venue that morning. So I straightened my tie, grabbed the booking calendar, and got back to work. As you can see, the grand hall features original oak beams, I explained to the gathered group, gesturing up to the vaulted ceiling. where morning light streamed through the clear-story windows. The sunbeams caught dust motes dancing in the air, just like they had all those years ago when Father and I first unveiled the restored woodwork. But what about our deposit? A bride-to-be stepped forward, clutching her phone. We booked with the previous owners. Every contract and deposit remains secure, I assured her, pulling out the continuity paperwork I'd prepared. The venue's ownership has reverted to me, the original owner, through a legal clause. Your dates, pricing, and arrangements stay exactly as planned. Carl moved efficiently through the background, switching out the carved wooden sign at the entrance from Wellington Estate back to simply The Estate. He replaced the event calendar, updated the contact information, and gathered the keys the in-law mother had abandoned on the antique console table. But the website still shows, another guest started. The website will be updated by close of business today, I cut in smoothly. You'll find my direct number listed there, along with our complete vendor partnerships and booking policies. The caterer appeared at my elbow with a simple witness statement, signing his name with a flourish before heading back to prep for today's event. I added his statement to the reversion packet, one more piece of documentation securing this transition. Movement caught my eye. Up on the mezzanine, Linda stood at the railing, gripping it like an anchor. Even from here, I could see her eyes were red and swollen. For a moment, our gazes met. I gave her a small nod, acknowledgement, not forgiveness, and turned back to the tour group. This wasn't about our broken marriage or her parents' greed. This was about the estate, about Father's legacy, about doing the job right. My phone vibrated. A preview link from the Society Page's editor. The headline read, Family Scandal Rocks Premier Wedding Venue. Below it, a photo spread told the story in stark images. Me locked out at the front steps months ago. The reversion clause document laid bare. My new ownership statement time-stamped at quarter open. The article would go live at noon. I clicked the phone dark and slipped it away. The past was the past. What mattered was standing right here, right now, in this space Father and I had built together. Walking to the carved double doors, I pushed them wide open, letting fresh morning air sweep through the grand hall. Sunlight flooded across the floorboards Father and I had spent weeks stripping, sanding, and refinishing by hand. I remembered him teaching me how to read the grain, how to follow the wood's natural pattern until it gleamed like honey. The estate hosts up to 200 guests, I continued, leading the tour toward the garden terrace. We provide full vendor coordination, on-site catering, and I kept talking, kept moving forward. Because that's what Father taught me. Do the work, do it well, and let the results speak for themselves. The cameras would leave, the gossip would fade, but this hall, these beams, this legacy, they'd remain solid as oak, stronger for having weathered the storm. I stood in the center of the grand hall, phone buzzing with notifications as the dominoes kept falling. Each ping marked another piece of my in-laws' carefully constructed empire crumbling to dust. Their side businesses, the yacht charter, the luxury car service, the vacation rentals, all seized by creditors who'd finally connected the dots. You know what's funny about karma? It moves like molasses, until suddenly it doesn't. Then, it's an avalanche. The Society Page's headline scrolled. Across my screen, Wedding Venue Scandal. Prominent Family's Web of Lies Exposed. The article pulled no punches, laying out how they'd tried to steal their own son-in-law's business through manipulated paperwork. Their social circle was imploding in real time, with comments and shares spreading the story faster than wildfire. Mr. Mercer? Jessica, our longest-serving waitstaff member, appeared at my elbow with a stack of vendor contracts. The florist and the lighting team are here to renew their agreements. They said they'd rather work with someone who honors their word. I managed a small smile. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you for staying on through all this. She'd been here since the beginning, had watched Father and me transform this place from a run-down manor to something magical. When the in-laws took over, she could have jumped ship, could have believed their lies. Instead, she'd kept her head down and waited for truth to surface. The truth always comes out, she said, as if reading my thoughts. Besides, this place? It's more than just a venue. It's home. Carl came through with his trademark heavy footsteps, carrying the reversion packet to the office. I watched him lock it securely in the filing cabinet, one more piece of history stored away where it belonged. The smell of fresh pastries wafted in as the caterer wheeled a tasting tray past the door. Through the window, I could see the young couple waiting in the consultation room, their faces bright with relief when they spotted me. They'd booked their wedding during my in-laws' brief reign, but now they knew their special day was in steady hands again. I closed the office door behind me and stepped out onto those sun-washed floorboards. Afternoon light poured through the tall windows, catching dust motes and golden beams. The same light that had guided Father and me as we'd raised those oak beams years ago, our backs aching, faces streaked with sweat and sawdust. The weight of the returned keys felt right in my pocket. Each one had its purpose. Front doors, service entrance, wine cellar, storage rooms. Father had labeled them all meticulously, teaching me the importance of knowing every inch of what you own. Above me, the oak beams creaked softly in the warming air, a sound as familiar as breathing. Father used to say those creaks were the building's heartbeat, proof that something built with care stays alive in its own way. I squared my shoulders and faced the double doors standing wide open to the afternoon. Fresh air swept in, carrying the scent of late summer roses from the garden where we held ceremonies. Soon there would be new vows spoken here, new beginnings, witnessed under these beams. The sun caught the brass keys as I pulled them from my pocket, making them gleam like truth finally brought to light. I turned them over in my palm, feeling their familiar edges. "Greed always burns brighter than love," I said to the empty hall, my voice steady in the sunlit quiet, "but burns out faster."